Asymmetrical Multiplayer Horror. What the hell did I just say? Genres in games are kind of a neat thing because there are so many of them. But within a said broad genre, there is also a subgenre. And in this case, a subgenre. I mean, seriously, there's so many games out there. You kind of just have to pigeonhole them all into one certain thing. And then even that's probably not enough because you got to pigeonhole it into another pigeonhole, and it's ridiculous. But I do want to talk about this genre, mostly because, at least, it is a bit niche, but thankfully, it's becoming a lot more popular. Instead of your typical deathmatch or head-to-head puzzle fighting game fare, asymmetrical multiplayer is pretty much what it sounds like. Each player in this multiplayer game is not equal. This can be as simple as one player controlling a turret while the other drives the car in an action sequence, to someone controlling a boss character while their opponent controls the heroes. It's a pretty broad term to say the least, but technically there's a bunch of asymmetrical multiplayer games out there. Whether you're a class-based shooter where everyone's a little different than everyone else, or, It Takes Two where, one character does one thing, the other one does another thing to, solve a puzzle. But I kind of want to more focus on, the latter games I mentioned, because, to be honest, playing a boss character versus a bunch of heroes is a whole lot of fun. As long as video games have been around, the component of multiplayer was always alongside it, whether it be someone controlling the left or right paddle in Pong, or something as incredible as a MUD. If you don't know what that is, it's a multi-user dungeon in the days when the internet was still a pipe dream to the average person. But one thing that was common in these multiplayer games was that everyone had an equal chance of winning. No buffs, no handicaps, you and the other player were on equal ground. This is by far the most popular way of playing multiplayer games today. Games like Call of Duty, Fortnite, Street Fighter, Mario Kart, Smash Bros, each player is an equal opponent to each other, and only your skill and knowledge of the game would lead you to a victory, or blind luck. But sadly in some of these games, some characters are OP, game mechanics are broken, and can be exploited, turning the whole game into a one-sided mess, where only those labeled as cheap will win every time. This is due to unfair advantage, and the playing field no longer being equal, and it's kind of a detriment, and makes the whole experience not fun. Right? Well, to most players, this is the truth, but oddly enough, there's been a subset of people who enjoy playing with an unfair advantage. Now, I'm not talking about people who use mods to cheat in competitive games. No, they deserve to be thrown into the tar pits. I'm talking about the psychos out there who found game exploits to enhance the overall fun of a game, and make an old game feel fresh again. You know those people, the players who purposely handicap themselves by using impaired controls, people who actively use in-game cheat codes to make one side more ridiculous to fight, or people so bored that they found out they can play as Master Hand in Super Smash Bros. Melee to fight against other normal fighters. Through this imbalance, this makes things far more interesting than a normal deathmatch game. Now, if only this was a practice that game developers messed around with more. Well, they have, for decades. Now going far back, asymmetrical multiplayer games have existed since the Atari 2600 days, with games like Nautilus, where one player controls a naval ship and the other controls a submarine, each with different goals, but ultimately competing against each other. But if you really want to be a stickler, the concept of asymmetry goes as far back as the Magnavox Odyssey, with games like Haunted House and Cat and Mouse. It's been a constant gameplay style in the industry, but definitely took a backseat to normal symmetrical games. Now, I don't know 100% where this, trend started, but off the top of my head, I think I have a few ideas where, get the ball rolling. And, besides mods, like Unreal Tournament or Doom, like gameplay modes, obviously people were doing some crazy stuff there. But I feel like in an official capacity, the first mode that even tried this and that became actually popular was Juggernaut in the Halo series. As far back as combat evolved, this mode allowed players to play a version of Reverse Hot Potato and Tag. In a typical 3v1 match, only one player is the Juggernaut, and the only way to earn points is to get kills as the Juggernaut. So the other three work as a team to hunt down the player who is it, in order for a chance to become the Juggernaut themselves. It seems a bit unfair, but the lone Juggernaut was just that, overpowered to the point that they could rip through their opponents like tissue paper, with increased health and damage output. And I put team in air quotes earlier because, again, whoever killed the Juggernaut then became them, instantly turning your allies into your foes. It was honestly a fun change up from the typical deathmatch fare, and it was definitely popular enough to keep being included in every Halo game since. But even having said that, it's still not the most popular gameplay style in Halo. When you think of Halo, you think of Team Deathmatch or Deathmatch or Capture the Flag. No. While that was an ember of the overall, beginning, I feel like the true first car in this hype train goes to a series made by Valve, and that's of course Left 4 Dead. Once again, looking away from mods like Half-Life Overwatch, and even though this game was inspired by mods itself, Left 4 Dead can be easily seen as the father of modern asymmetrical multiplayer games. pitting 4 players versus an AI director. The AI director controlled everything from item placement to when and where the swarm of zombies are released onto the hapless survivors. But wait, that's an artificial intelligence. Could the director be controlled by a player? In an official capacity, no, but Left 4 Dead had the next best thing. 4v4, where opposites to the survivors were players controlling the special infected, a group of elite zombies with special attributes designed to kill and deter the survivors in different ways. Not only would going against real players make the game harder for the heroes, but playing as the infected elite gave the game not only a fresh new way to play, it gave players an avenue to be far more sadistic. Fighting your way through hordes of infected was cool, but trapping a survivor of the smoker's tongue while a teammate detonates a boomer on the rest of the survivors as they try to help definitely puts a whole new fiendish smile on my face. Thankfully, I was not alone. Other players started to gain a taste for this new playstyle, and with the release and success of Left 4 Dead 2, other developers started to take note of this as well. Once again, asymmetry was nothing new, but this notion of giving one side of a multiplayer match control of a technically more powerful enemy definitely was. With this popularity, a lot of other games adopted similar gameplay modes as an alternative to more popular team deathmatch and capture the flag. Most games attach these modes with a survival horror aesthetic, labeling it as a zombies mode or monsters mode, obviously a remnant of Left 4 Dead's reputation. But it made sense, as the human characters you were surviving against players of inhuman capabilities. This definitely made the games far more tense than a simple war shooter. But this only solidified future game modes. What about a whole game built from the ground up in this style? Well, only one company was up to the task, and that was Turtle Rock Studios. And if you don't know, you're probably wondering, who the hell is that? Well, they're the ones who made Left 4 Dead. What started as an indie game, Left 4 Dead and Turtle Rock Studios were acquired by Valve to develop the game. The game was a huge hit and all that, but weirdly enough, after the release of the game, both studios quickly separated and went their own way due to communication issues. And this sadly led to the indie company losing the rights to the Left 4 Dead name. But still, they were contracted to work on the DLC and the sequel itself. A weird business move to say the least, but this allowed for Turtle Rock Studios to work alongside Valve, yet still be their own entity. Which of course leads me to their next title, a landmark in the asymmetrical multiplayer game genre. And that is of course, Evolve. And by landmark, I mean a shitty freaking tourist trap in the middle of nowhere that was nowhere near worth the 12-hour drive it took to get there. Evolve represented everything that could possibly go wrong in a game like this, and was a prime example of shoddy business practices happening at the time. Terrible DLC cosmetics, multiple season passes at launch, and worst of all, boring gameplay. The fun of a game like this is essentially something similar to Monster Hunter. You and 3 other friends take down a behemoth through your skills and teamwork. Only in Evolve, you also get a luxury of making it 4v1, with a player controlling the monster in question. That sounds like it should be great. But instead, what players got was an uneven character roster, a tedious searching phase where hunters would just wander around until they found the monster, and very underwhelming battles that amounted to which side had the odds stacked in their favor. Don't get me wrong, this game could be very fun when the battle was on, but those moments were fleeting, and this did not excuse the mountain of bullshit the player was expected to go through to even get a glimpse of it. It was a disaster to say the least, and within months the game was essentially dead with a tiny fan base. And even when it switched to a free-to-play model, the dedicated servers were shut down in less than 4 years from initial launch. And to be honest, even that seemed too long. So with that, it seemed like the subgenre had an issue on its hands, and the new trend was dead before it could flesh itself out. Well, almost. As I mentioned before, the horror angle was definitely a big compliment to this type of game. So, as Evolve was crashing and burning, a handful of indie developers fell in love with the idea of 4v1. But this time they decided to go all in and base their games off a horror movie aesthetic. Thanks to games like Until Dawn, horror movies were back in style, at least in the sense of gamers. So along came a game called Dead by Daylight. And everything went to hell. Practically a match made in heaven, 4 vs 1 was the name of the game, and it was 4 survivors versus a serial killer, albeit with a twist. The survivor's goal was simple: escape this small little map by opening a door through fixing generators, while the killer's goal was to hunt down the survivors, disable them, hang them by meat hooks, and wait for them to be sacrificed to an entity. Huh. Okay, I figured it'd just be easier just to kill them, but alright, fine, I'll play along. But at least the survivors can fight back by putting pallets down and stunning the killer with firecrackers. Yeah, okay. Now I know I'm going to piss off a lot of people here, but Dead by Daylight to me is just okay. I mean, it's definitely not my style of game, and to be honest, I can't believe I'm saying this, but with a horror game, there's gotta be a little more action than this. As a horror game, it's a pretty tense experience, but the lack of full-blown combat definitely hinders it a bit. It's just a big game of hide and seek, and once you die, you can't really do anything. It's essentially reverse Pac-Man. But you know what? At least Pac-Man can kill the ghosts. Little bit of a tangent here, but I don't like Outlast for the same reason. I prefer survival horror over just straight horror. This is why I prefer games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Now, being down to my last bullet while facing a monster is far more nerve-wracking than hiding in a closet while the killer searches around for you. Both are great, but I honestly feel to make an asymmetrical horror experience more fun, you got to add the survival element to it. But you know what? Despite my reservations, Dead by Daylight has gone on to become a smash hit, ported to practically every game console, and it's still releasing DLC to this day. It has had a huge following, and there is nothing wrong with that, especially when the success has definitely encouraged other developers to make other games, thankfully with a more survival horror flavor to them. Whispers of a Similar Killer game hit Kickstarter, only this time it was set at a camp by a lake, and it was titled Slashers Volume 1, Summer Camp. Very reminiscent of Friday the 13th, to be honest, and, well, thanks to a bunch of behind-the-scenes deals and the creator of said Friday the 13th series, Sean S. Cunningham, signing off on it, the game quickly evolved into Friday the 13th, the game. And I have to admit, I was hyped for this game. I didn't back the Kickstarter, but I was for sure gonna buy it day one. And lo and behold, at launch, it was a buggy mess, but with tons of potential. The initial launch left a sour taste in many people's mouths, exploits were rampant, people would get stuck in walls, and sometimes people would just freeze in place. It was hilarious to see in compilation videos on YouTube. Not so much when it happened to you in-game. But the development company, Ilphonic, worked tirelessly to fix the exploits, and thanks to it doing initially well at launch, sales-wise, the game garnered its own cult following, and it maintained a decent player base, allowing for years of fun. Now, if you never played it, at a distance it does seem like a DBD knockoff, but nothing could be farther from the truth. This time around, the play space was set in a much larger map. Each match had 7 counselors versus 1 Jason, and while the goal of the counselors is to escape through several predetermined means, they can fight back using weapons found across the map. Now, while it was possible to kill Jason, it definitely was not the go-to way to win the game. Instead, you're supposed to scavenge for supplies and try to survive long enough until you and your teammates figure a way out. But now on the other side, Jason. And well, his goal was to kill them all. And he was a force to be reckoned with. Keeping in line with the movies themselves, he was essentially immortal. He could cloak his presence at a distance, he could literally teleport to any point on the map, and he could move around like a spirit, Evil Dead style. Now this sounds horribly unfair, and it was. But that's what made the game better, because it would force other players to work together to try and survive. Compound that with multiple Jasons and counselors to choose from, all of which had different skill attributes and weaknesses, and you have an absolute mess of a game that was both hectic, but fun. Asymmetrical multiplayer games are a bitch to balance, but it's not impossible, and Ilphonic did a decent job of making sure it was equally fun to play either as the good guys or Jason. Oh, and the amount of lore and cool Easter eggs strewn across the game made it a must-own for any fan of the movie series as well. It honestly was a good framework for better things to come. But sadly, thanks to good old licensing issues, the game was cut short in its prime. Right after they announced that Jason X content was coming, the original writer of the first film pulled the rug under everyone and gained the rights to the original movie, turning the game into a licensing nightmare, and ultimately putting a halt to any future DLC of the game. Dedicated servers were killed off, and the game lives on through peer-to-peer matches only. But this was not the end. The DLC was scrapped, but the beta builds of them still existed, and thanks to the active modding scene, the content is available to PC players. Stuff like Uber Jason, the promised map from Jason X, and even the Jason from the 2009 reboot have seen the light of day, amongst other things. So if you got a PC, I highly recommend checking it out for just a cool look at what could have officially been. Regardless though, outside of Friday the 13th, for fans of the genre, things were finally starting to pick up in a huge way, with a good amount of games on the horizon. So, let's do a little bit of a speed round. First up, Last Year the Nightmare, another Kickstarter game that began its campaign around the time Friday the 13th did. So don't even try to call this a ripoff of that. It's 5v1 and class-based. Each student has their strengths and can fight back against the killer. But once again, lone wolf it here and you are mincemeat. It's a lot of fun, but thanks to just okay sales, it never grew past its initial content, and it's ultimately dead. It's a little weird too because on Steam there's like 2 versions, but you can only buy one, and it's the incomplete. This game is dead. Resident Evil Resistance. This one was out of left field, but also a good indication that AAA companies were also starting to note the success of these kind of games. Alongside the remake of Resident Evil 3, Capcom included a little experiment that they were working on, and this in all honesty is not a bad game. A lot of the bad press this game gets is from people who hated Remake 3, and wanted a reimagining of the original Mercenaries mode. While I do get where they're coming from, especially since I've done a 180 on RE3 myself after playing it in VR. By itself, Resistance is a pretty cool test game in the RE series, and to be honest, a bit of a pioneer in their subgenre. Once again, 4v1, 4 survivors versus a mastermind director, but this time as an honest-to-God director like in Left 4 Dead. Instead of embodying a single enemy and respawning, the mastermind had control of where to spawn enemies, set traps, and when leveled up, take control of BOWs to attack the survivors head-on. It was a pretty cool side project for Capcom, but ultimately a failure, due to waning interest from fans and some early balancing issues that put off early adopters that tried it. Even after most issues were patched out, sadly the game was destined for an early grave. Released very shortly after that was Predator Hunting Grounds, and all I can say here is, what the fuck? Made by the same team that did Friday the 13th the game, IllFonic, Predator was a letdown and in my opinion was the worst game I have mentioned so far. 4v1 once again, 4 fireteam operatives are on a mission and must accomplish a task until they're interrupted by a predator stalking and hunting them. Now that's a cool premise, but at launch it was bug-ridden, lacked any real focus, the predator wasn't fun to play as, and ultimately a slog to play through as the fireteam. So avoid this one at all. You know what? No. I have not played this game since launch and that's not fair. I mean, I gave IllFonic a chance with Friday the 13th and I've seen them make a somewhat okay game to a great game. And yes, may not be your cup of tea, but regardless, I trust this company. So screw it. Let's try it again. And well, holy shit, this game's not dead. Holy shit, the queue is actually pretty short. People are still playing this game. And holy shit, this is actually pretty good. You know what? I'm glad that I'm wrong, because a Predator game sounds like a great time, and yeah, this is really fun. IllFonic pulled it off and managed to fix every major issue the game had at launch. Tons of content has been released, and playing as the Predator is actually pretty awesome. Especially if you're a fan of the movies, this is a game to get. This is an easy recommendation from me. It's not the best game in the world, don't get me wrong, but if you like Friday the 13th, or you just like this genre in general, this is actually really good now. Hell yeah, I'm really happy. Good job, IllFonic. And now, I've saved the best for last, and these next 2 games are, in my opinion, the pinnacles of this genre, and I mean, these games are great, but also, they're 2 sides of the same coin, in the sense that in horror there are 2 basic templates that you can tell in a horror story. And, well, that's the way, at least according to John Carpenter.
2 basically templates of a horror story, and very quickly I can illustrate them. If you imagine we're all sitting around a campfire in the old days and the medicine man is standing there, and we're a tribe, and he says, let me tell you where the evil is. It's out there beyond the darkness. It's the other tribe. It's the beasts in the woods. That's the evil. That's one story. The evil from outside. Same situation. We're in a circle around a campfire. The medicine man or the holy man stands up and says, I'll tell you where evil is. It's right in here. It's in our human hearts. It's in us. That's evil on the inside. 2 stories.
So far, we've seen many examples of the former. But what about the latter horror story? Well, this next game is a perfect example, and you've definitely heard of it. Among Us. Now, at a distance, it appears to be vastly different to all the previously mentioned games, but in reality, it's a perfect realization of this style. Previously 4 to 10, but now up to 15 players wake up in an isolated base, and must go around to accomplish tasks to fix said base, all while being stalked by monsters. But the twist here is, the monster is one of the other survivors, hiding behind the skin of a typical player. These imposters are tasked with one task: eliminate the other crewmates, either through murdering them in secret, or sabotaging the base, ultimately killing all those aboard. Heavily inspired by John Carpenter's movie The Thing, which itself is an adaptation of a novella titled Who Goes There, the real meat of the game comes in the discuss phase, after someone reports a dead body or just wants to call a meeting. It's here when every player is forced to accuse others or defend their own humanity, because in these meetings, a single player can be voted out and ejected from the base to their death. Whether the person ejected is a human or an imposter contributes to the crew's final goal: eradicate the base of all imposters or fix everything before it's too late. It's easily the most popular game in said genre. even if you didn't realize it was part of this genre. Although having said that, even I have to admit, it's not really an original game at all. I mean, besides being influenced by The Thing, this type of game was already popular in board and party game markets thanks to games such as Werewolf, also known as Mafia. It may be repackaged, but hey, it just proves the longevity of how paranoia can be fun. Any one of your friends can be a foe, and you don't know it. And someone who you think you've known your whole life can be the one who stabs you in the back. If you know, you know. But if you haven't played it, I cannot recommend this game enough, but you gotta play it with a mic. The true meat here is the arguments and distrust that creeps over you as you play the game with other players. But if you really want to be immersed, play this in VR. The tension is present in the 2D game, but if you want true horror, there is nothing like roaming the halls of a base while being surrounded by a bunch of people you can't trust. And like I've said, this was huge. Among Us has gone on to become a smash hit that even has become popular with non-gamers. It is out on literally every platform imaginable, and the developer Innersloth is going to be supporting it for the foreseeable future with new content coming out. It is one of the apex of the genre, and just one hell of a video game in general. So yeah, that is the gold standard and seriously a perfect example of the, evil within our own psyche. But what about the former? I mean, I mentioned already a bunch of games about, the evil out there, but what's the best? And at least what's at least the best culmination of every title I've mentioned before in this genre? Well, it's not new, and it's not original, and it's definitely familiar, but I think it's the best. Evil Dead, the game. Take the best aspects of every title mentioned in this video, and you end up with a surprise hit. Once again, for the final time, 4v1. 4 survivors versus 1 Kandarian demon. Each survivor is represented by a well-known character in the Evil Dead franchise, with their own set class, unique skills, and skill tree builds that make them unique. While the Kandarian demon has multiple iterations that focus on certain buffs and attributes built to make the survivor's journey hell. The premise is very simple. Set in the largest map by far out of all these games, the heroes must summon the Book of the Dead by scavenging for supplies, fighting off hordes of enemies, and accomplishing linear tasks, all while a Kandarian demon glides around collecting energy, setting traps, summoning basic and elite units, or ultimately possessing a boss unit, or even the survivors themselves so they can turn their own weapons on their own teammates. Seriously, downing a whole team with a hunter class while they're holding a legendary boomstick is a thrill. Which brings me to why I think it's the perfect example of a balanced asymmetrical multiplayer game. Besides the randomness of objective placement and, rare loot, balancing your survivor team is integral at the character selection screen. And even before that, leveling up and creating specific builds for each character in your arsenal is the true metagame here. Whether you are a survivor or a demon main, the player has the option to level up any character thanks to spirit points. Essentially XP that you can put into whoever you want, whenever you want, despite who you were playing as before. This along with the fact that it's impossible to fully level up the skill tree of any character. You are forced to determine what perks are more important to you and fit your playstyle. To me, this is the bread and butter of the game, and while not 100% original, the idea of restricting the skill tree is perfectly utilized here, and makes the overall experience something that you just want to keep going back into over and over. Short of some game-breaking bugs at launch and sadly the arrival of cheaters, the developer Saber Interactive has a pretty good grasp of the game so far, through constant patches, tweaking the system, and the new report system that actually allows to ban cheaters. Which I just have to call out. I mean, if you're a cheater in a game, like an actual cheater, like in competitive games, why do you do it? Do you find it funny? Is that really the only way you could win? I mean, I don't get it. Because it may say you won at the end of the game, but the rest of us see you for what you really are. Sad, pathetic, and ultimately a loser, because when you log off, that's what you are. You have to cheat in the game. That's pretty sad. Regardless, yeah, as the Evil Dead game grows, I will continue to support these types of games, and continue to play this specific one. Not just out of pure fanboyism, no. I mean, I do love the Evil Dead franchise. But because it's an honest-to-God good game. I thought it was just going to be a cool time killer to pick up and play. But no, I have actually platinumed this game. And yeah, I just gotta put that out there. I am not bragging that I platinumed this. I mean, I rarely platinum games. I'm just trying to state the point that I could not put the controller down. This was easily one of my most favorite games of this genre. And it's honestly a huge blast. It's a decently balanced love letter to a horror staple franchise, and it's a great time with friends. But most importantly, probably the biggest reason I love it, is the difficulty. I honestly enjoy challenging games, and this truly makes me feel like my wins are earned. Even if this game loses many casual players, this is definitely going to live on as a hardcore gamer's delight. And if you don't believe me, look up how many people have complained about the single player missions online. I don't think that they are that hard, but even I have to admit, compared to other games, it really shows how easy games have gotten in the past few decades. So yeah, I recommend this game wholeheartedly. As far as asymmetrical multiplayer horror games, this is my favorite so far. It perfectly mixes action, survival horror elements, and skill tree balancing. So here's to not only the Evil Dead game, but to every future title in the subgenre that is asymmetrical multiplayer horror. I cannot wait to see what's in store for us. Hell yeah. Well, that's the video. And yeah. Did I just make this whole video just to praise Evil Dead the game? No. Maybe. But what I really want to point out here is really just, I just wanted to point out the actual genre itself, because yes, it's becoming bigger and bigger, but it's still relatively new, and yet it is pretty much hit the mainstream pretty quickly, and at least compared to other freaking game styles and like other freaking genres. But yeah, I just love it. I just love these types of games, and honestly, it's just not just because it pushes people to come together and just like work as a team, but more because I just love stepping in the shoes as a villain and just eviscerating my enemies one by one with my freaking hands, or even just playing games like Among Us where I'm just lying and just manipulating my friends through persuasion and coercion, and just their look on their faces when they find out that I'm actually a monster. Jesus, I have problems. Whatever. Regardless, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.